Story 1. One time, my partner sat up straight at 3 a.m., looked at me completely serious, and whispered, "Don't trust the ravioli." Then, immediately face planted back into the pillow as if nothing happened. I still haven't eaten ravioli since. Story 2. Watch out for the one in the corner. This was when I got up to use the bathroom. To be fair, we had been playing a lot of video games, but I almost jumped out of my skin. Story 3. My partner is a medical doctor and said clearly in his sleep, "The patient arrived at 3 a.m. dead as a doornail." Story 4. My husband giggled in his sleep. There was no talking, just giggling, full-on 14-year-old girl giggles. He is 6 feet 2 inches tall, weighs 280 pounds, and is a retired United States Air Force security police officer. Even if you went to bed upset, it was hard to stay mad if he started giggling. Story 5. He had a conversation telling me about the salt and pepper epidemic and how it was affecting communities around the world. I was completely asleep. Story 6. We had a newborn son and had been home with him for a couple of weeks. My spouse woke me up and was yelling at me because it was time to connect our son to the heart monitor. He was holding the alarm clock. I had no idea what was going on and finally realized he was sleep-talking. It is by far the oddest instance, but another time he yelled about Cinnabons. He's a pretty normal guy when he's not acting out his dreams. Story 7. I woke up during my sleep and shook my ex-girlfriend awake. I pointed at the open closet, and she freaked out. I said, "It doesn't concern us right now." She responded with, "What? What's wrong?" Needless to say, she didn't get any sleep after that. Story 8. I was sleeping in sweatpants and a t-shirt, and he was sleeping right next to me. Apparently, I kept mumbling, which woke him up. Then I said, "Socks are too hot," and cried in my sleep. The poor guy had to remove my pants and roll me over. Story 9. He turned over and told me, "I am not responsible for your toenails tonight because they forgot the ketchup." Story 10. My husband's favorite moment was when I told him that pilgrims were skating past the foot of our bed shortly before Thanksgiving that year. His least favorite moment was when I woke him up because spiders were falling from the ceiling. I experienced vivid hallucinations in my sleep for years until one night my husband pointed out that I couldn't see clearly 10 inches from my nose due to my horrible nearsightedness. In 30 years, I have never had another episode. Story 11. My husband used to work in safety for United Parcel Service, and I was trying to wake him for breakfast. Instead of getting up, he was saying, "There needs to be a guardrail here. It's not safe. Concrete here. Some there. Not safe." He was also gently caressing a pillow at that time. Story 12. Not a partner, but a college roommate. We were on a school trip to Pittsburgh, and he and I shared a room. I don't sleep well, so at 3:30 a.m., I was reading a book when he suddenly sat bolt upright and said forcefully, "I don't think you should buy the expensive one," then lay back down. To this day, we have no idea why he said that. In the morning, he had no memory of a dream or any experience that might have explained it. We were both completely sober, too. Story 13. When we were busy and stressed with wedding planning a couple of months ago, I apparently talked a lot in my sleep. My husband said one night I sprang up into a seated position at about 2 a.m., put my arms straight out in front of me as if I were holding something, and started yelling, "Hot soup! I've got hot soup coming through." When he asked what I was talking about, I responded, "It's not that deep, brother. It's just hot soup." Then I immediately lay back down into a deep sleep. I have no recollection of this, but I think it's really funny. Story 14. I wish I could remember. He passed away 11 years ago, and my brain will never be the same. Anyway, whatever he said made me laugh so hard I had to bury my head in my pillow so he wouldn't wake up. He often talked in his sleep, which was a great source of amusement for me. Story 15. He turned over in bed and said, "Hey, listen, I found an extra life on the beach. You can have it." Story 16. During the airing of the first season of Severance, my husband kept saying, "It's Severance." He grew increasingly frustrated because I had no idea what he was talking about until he woke up and realized he had been asleep. Story 17. When I first started dating my partner, she wouldn't fart in front of me. One day we were napping in bed, and my partner ripped a huge fart in her sleep. It was so loud that it woke us up. The bed shook like thunder overhead. I pretended to be asleep, but I saw her look around and then go back to bed. Honestly, it took every fiber of my being not to burst out laughing. Story 18. Apparently, I told a guy I dated, "I love you," in my sleep. Or was it in his sleep? We will never know. An ex of mine was playing basketball in his sleep and slam dunked the ball right into my stomach. Story 19. On a couple of occasions, my 6-foot, 220-pound ex leapt from a dead sleep into a crouched position in bed. It was startling. Story 20. It was me talking. One night, I started yelling and crying about how I was going to talk to my lawyer in my sleep. My husband thought I was having a dream about divorce and that I must be thinking about divorcing him. He was upset about it and brought it up to me the next day. Fortunately for him, I usually remember my dreams, and that night I had been dreaming that our neighbors cemented over my flower bed, and I was so mad because our tulips had just begun to bloom. Nothing about divorce. I just wanted to sue our neighbors. Story 21. I think this is the cutest. He seemed half asleep but called my name, saying, "Baby, why are you so far? Come here. I'm only a few steps away." I rolled into his arms, and he wrapped them around me and said, "Thank you." This is from a 6 feet 2 inches grown man with a full beard and nice braids. Story 22. Unclear, but he frequently speaks in his native language. I'm learning it, but when he's asleep, it sounds like gibberish. Story 23. Not my partner, but me. I sleepwalk and talk when I'm stressed. He once found me digging under the bed, saying over and over again, "I have to save the women." To this day, none of us know what my goal really was. Story 24. Scariest. I will knock him out. Funniest. There are many, but usually, just the hysterical giggling while sound asleep always makes me laugh too. Story 25. He yelled at me, "What are you doing?" I was sitting up in bed, reading, and didn't realize he was asleep. I jerked as that startled me and replied, "Nothing." He yelled, "Don't stab me." I said, "All right, I won't." He rolled over and didn't make another sound. So far, I have kept my word. Story 26. True. And sometimes he would do short dances before going back to sleep. Story 27. He said he killed the cat. We never had a cat, nor did he before our relationship. We don't know anyone who has a cat. It's weird. Story 28. One time, I took a late nap and slept through the night. My boyfriend said he tried to wake me up, and I apparently told him, "Don't touch me, you're disgusting," in my sleep. Story 29. Not me, but a friend of mine had to share a room with her sister during a vacation. The sister suddenly stood up from her bed and started taking bows toward my friend while saying amen or some prayer. That would have definitely scared me. Story 30. Not my partner, but my cousin. We were hanging out when she nodded off and suddenly exclaimed, "Damn potholes." I woke her up laughing. Story 31. My fiancée scratches her armpits in her sleep, but after our recent addiction to Minecraft, I asked her to stop. She sleepily tried to gaslight me, claiming she was digging dirt. Story 32. After watching the Olympics years ago, my husband shot straight up in bed, woke me and said, "I'm never going to Belarus." Story 33. My husband is a sleepwalker who stands at the foot of the bed and stares at me. If I sternly tell him to go to bed, he will. Recently, our sleepwalking son came into the office after bedtime, and my husband tried that approach on him. He ended up in the dog bed. Story 34. One time shortly after we started dating, my husband fell asleep while we were watching television. A little while later, he half sat up and forcefully told me to just pick a character. Apparently, he was dreaming he was watching me play The Reckoning, and I was spending around 30 minutes on the first character creation screen just going back and forth between options. Bonus story not about my partner. When my sister and I were kids, we had a sleepover in the living room, and she fell asleep before I did. To my horror, she randomly sat up and started undressing. She seemed fully awake, and I was so confused. Unfortunately, she then actually woke up to me yelling at her to put her clothes back on. I was about 10 and she was around 6. Story 35. This was part of a 3-hour conversation. He sings parodies in his sleep. Row, row, row your boat quickly down the stream. You better get there fast. R. Kelly has to pee. Story 36. Years ago, my wife mentioned that I would sometimes talk in my sleep. She would ask me questions and I would reply. One night, I apparently said to her, "Don't be afraid of the season." She laughed so hard that she woke me up and told me. I have no idea what that meant. Story 37. I once dated someone whose biggest fear was being possessed by a demon. One night, while she was still asleep, I heard a demonic-sounding inhalation. I saw her staring me in the eyes and speaking in what sounded like Latin in a deep voice while grabbing me. I instinctively grabbed her arms, and at that point, she laid back on her side and drifted into a peaceful slumber. She claimed no memory of it the next day. Story 38. My wife often wakes me up by talking, and I figured out it's really fun to guide her dreams wherever I want. She realized this years ago, and depending on how it goes, she either laughs or gets very upset. It reminds me of the song, Talking in Your Sleep by the Cars. Story 39. My partner turned around in the middle of the night and hit me in the face while turning, then said, "Who is vibrating?" Story 40. The partner was me, and the context required is that I occasionally talk in my sleep with my eyes wide open and respond when people talk to me. In the second week that my now ex lived with me, I turned to her, seemingly wide awake, and said we have to burn it all to the ground. Story 41. My partner was next to me when I said in my sleep, "There's a man at the window." For context, we were on the second floor, so unless he was on a ladder, we quote it now and again for a laugh. Story 42. Not my partner, but one time I went to a summer camp with a girl who talks in her sleep. One thing I remember her saying is, "I saw someone flying. Never mind." Story 43. Partner. Why do the hot dogs sound like thunder? Me, wait, what? Partner. The wieners. Story 44. My partner told me that in the morning I had sat in bed in the middle of the night and yelled at him to eat the pies. Story 45. I realized I needed a glass of water in the middle of the night. My sister was also awake with one of her friends at that time. I sleepwalked into the kitchen, grabbed a glass, chugged the water, refilled it, and left while staring at them as if they had committed a crime. Story 46. It was the middle of summer, and one night he told me, "Winter's coming, babe." Okay, if you say so. Story 47. When my ex and I were together, we had just finished watching The Conjuring one night. We turned off the lights, and he fell asleep before I did. It was pitch black, and I was just about to doze off when he suddenly said, "What is that?" I couldn't fall asleep for a while after that. Story 48. Not a partner but a friend and roommate. I will call her Amy for the sake of the story. I couldn't sleep, so I just lay there silently. I don't know how long it was, maybe hours. I got up to check the time. It was 3 a.m. I went back to my room and sat down. Minutes passed, and I was slowly drifting off to sleep while still in the corner when I heard my name being called from the floor where she was sound asleep. "Mia! Mia! Run! Don't stop!" I was convinced she was faking it. Story 49. Not my partner, but me. Apparently, I woke him up saying, "No, don't, please." He woke me up worried about what I was dreaming about, which I couldn't tell him. Story 50. Long ago, a girlfriend and I went to see The Bodyguard. She sat up, woke me, yelled, "Don't fall in love with your clients," and then lay back down and rolled over, doing all of this in her sleep. Story 51. I have no idea. The man speaks 10 languages. English is not his first language, and I do not understand whatever he speaks in his sleep. He did, however, try to beat me to death with his size 15 shoes, thinking I was a wild tiger on the hunt. Story 52. Not stated exactly, but he will occasionally laugh like a deep serial killer laugh. Kind of reminds me of Bowser's laugh from the game. Story 53. Spouse and I rented an older decommissioned train car for a bed and breakfast experience. "Wake me up," I whispered as I woke to him shaking my shoulder with a worried look on his face. This began a series of him waking me due to my shouting while I slept. I don't know, man. Story 54. Oh, I have one. When I was living with my parents, I had a television at the end of my bed. We were dating for a while and my boyfriend stayed over a lot. We had a habit of lighting a small candle on top of the television. One night, we did not light the candle, and he fell asleep while watching a movie. Suddenly, he got on his hands and knees, eyes wide open, and crawled to the television. He started blowing and waving at it, obviously still asleep. When I managed to stop laughing, I asked what he was doing. He sat up, looked at me sheepishly, and in a very annoyed tone said, "I'm blowing out the television." I eventually had to turn off the television because he did not give up. He started waving and blowing so frantically that I was dying of laughter, afraid I would wake up my parents and siblings. Story 55. Babe, it was an agonal groaning type of drawl, and I thought something was actually wrong for a couple of seconds before she started visibly breathing. I wanted to wake her up, but it's best to let sleeping dogs lie. Story 56. I experienced what I now understand to be sleep paralysis. At the time, I was half asleep when an unsettling figure crawled out from under the bed and started choking me. I pushed her away and tried to wake my girlfriend. In her sleep, she said, "She's gone now." I never told her what happened. As for the funniest moment, I said, "Go away. I'm pre-treating." I have no idea what that means. Story 57. Not said, but once I walked by my husband's bedroom, and he let out a deep, villainous laugh in his sleep. It was the kind of laugh an evil mastermind makes when his plans come together. I've always regretted not having a recorder on at that moment. Story 58. I was lying down in the bedroom while my husband was asleep on the couch. I heard him moving around, and he came to the bedroom. As he lay in bed, I asked him if he was all right, and he responded, "Why are there people in the living room?" before falling back asleep. I was fine for a moment, and then my mind went to what if? I stayed in bed. Later on, he shot his arm out and pointed at the open closet, holding his arm there for what felt like minutes. He then said, "They're standing in the closet now." I tried waking him up, but that was impossible. The next morning, I told him about it, and he seemed a little put off. Imagine how I felt last night. Anyway, he's a sleep talker and yells out some wild things. The best moment for me was when he put his arms up in the air, as if he was riding a bike and yelled, "Send it!" and "Hey, forget you, Smokey." Story 59. My wife wanted me to play the Nintendo Switch beside her in bed while she slept. I did and had a good time. We lived in a ground-level apartment with a window in our bedroom. You could see a bit of grass, and beyond that, there was a little river where you almost never saw anyone walking. While I was playing the Switch and enjoying myself, my wife raised her head, looked out the window, and said in a somewhat fearful voice, "What is that?" I was pulled out of my gaming world, thinking something was trying to enter our apartment through the window, and I exclaimed, "What?" My wife replied, "Not important," then turned around and fell asleep in seconds. Yeah, I don't play the Switch in bed anymore. Story 60. Not a partner, but me. All I remember is waking up in the middle of the night, sitting up in bed with my hands in the air. I was fixing shoes on the rack. I had worked at a shoe store for about 3 years at that point, and saying that I could straighten shoes in my sleep was not a lie. Story 61. I was wearing a tight-fitting undershirt that had a hood and was bright orange. It was a great base layer for working outdoors in the winter. I went to kiss my wife before leaving for work, and she was almost still asleep, thinking I was going scuba diving. Story 62. I can come to bed right away or in 10 minutes. I can wait 10 more minutes without my jacket. Don't worry. Story 63. Not my partner, but my mom said, "Your mother knits socks in hell." I don't know where it came from. We haven't watched anything related to The Exorcist in years. I guess it was just on her mind while dreaming. It's still not pleasant to hear coming from a pitch-black bedroom while walking down the dark hall to the bathroom at 3 a.m. Story 64. This was apparently me. We don't use the appendix for the stew. Use the index. I'm still not convinced I said it, although it sounds like a pun I would make. Story 65. I woke up with my husband doing something on the floor. I asked him what was happening, and he said in a loud whisper, "They're trying to get in." "Who is?" I asked. "They are," he said, still in that loud whisper. Then he promptly got back in bed and went to sleep. The next morning, I saw one of his pillows somewhat stuffed under the closet door, which was on his side of the bed. I asked him about it, and he said that in his dream, little people were coming into the room from the closet. Story 66. I broke up with my girlfriend in my sleep. It took me a moment to understand why she was acting so strangely the next morning. Story 67. My partner sat up and looked at me with her eyes closed, and in her native language asked, "Well, where is it?" I didn't understand her language at the time, so I asked, "What, love?" She then paused, burst out giggling, covered her face like it was a naughty secret, and fell instantly back asleep. In the morning, I repeated what she had said to me, and she explained its meaning. She still feels embarrassed when I mention it, which I do often. Story 68. An ex now, but he had been snoring, so I poked him to roll over. He opened his eyes, gave me a blank stare, and said, "I hope you get hit by a bus." Then he rolled over. I had a good laugh about it. Story 69. One time, my partner said, "Thank you." I immediately woke up and said he just had a dream where I spit in his mouth. Story 70. Not my partner, but my mom was sleeping when suddenly she started talking nonsense. "Away! Away! Skank! Bitch! Away!" while flailing her hands around. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.